It came back in the mail today. The baby shower invitation I'd sent to my mother's house, addressed to her and my sister Whitney. It wasn't just marked "Return to Sender." Someone had torn open the envelope, pulled out the creamy cardstock with its little cartoon elephants, and scrawled a message across the front in my mother's shaky, furious cursive. "We're not going to be grandparents to your mistake. My name is Robin Simmons." I'm 34 years old, 7 months pregnant with my first child, and for the first time in my life, I don't feel a thing. I stood there in my hallway, the returned invitation in one hand, the rest of the mail scattered at my feet, and felt a profound, unnerving calm settle over me. There was no surge of tears, no scream of frustration. It was just quiet, the final, deafening silence after a decade-long explosion. My husband, Aiden, is 36. We've been married for 8 years. To my family, he's always been that man, the one who wasn't good enough, who didn't come from the right background, who supposedly stole me away. My mother, Caroline, who is 62, still refers to him by his first name only, with a slight curl of her lip, as if the word tastes bad. My sister, Whitney, who is 31 and has 2 kids of her own with her husband, Liam, just follows Mom's lead. They see Aiden as an unwelcome intruder into their tidy, dysfunctional world. And the baby? Our baby, the one I've wanted for years, is just an extension of him. A mistake. I thought about all the years I'd tried, the holidays I hosted, spending hundreds on food they barely touched, the birthdays I never forgot, always sending thoughtful gifts that were never acknowledged, the thousands of dollars I'd loaned them over the years that were never meant to be paid back. Most of all, I thought about the house, my grandfather's house. He left it to me, and only me, when he passed away 10 years ago. He saw me. He knew that I was the only one who had a steady job, the only one who was responsible. But when he died, my mother had just gone through a messy divorce and Whitney was a new mom with no income. They were going to be homeless. "Just until we get back on our feet, Robin," my mother had wept. A year, maybe 2. That was a decade ago. For 10 years, my mother, my sister, her husband Liam, and their 2 children have lived rent-free in a 4-bedroom house that I own. I've paid the property taxes. I've paid for every major repair. The new roof, the boiler that went out 2 winters ago, the plumbing disaster last spring. They lived like royalty in my inheritance, while I lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment with Aiden, saving every penny for our future, for this baby. I folded the invitation, the ugly words creasing right down the middle. The calm was still there, a solid, cold thing in my chest. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. You can't keep setting yourself on fire to keep other people warm. I was finally out of fuel. I walked into the living room, picked up my phone, and Googled real estate agents in my hometown. I scrolled past the flashy, smiling faces until I found one that looked different. Samantha Lewis, 59 according to her bio. She looked professional. No nonsense. I dialed her number. She answered on the second ring. "Samantha Lewis speaking." "Hello, Ms. Lewis," I said, my voice even. "My name is Robin Simmons. I have a property I'd like to sell." 3 weeks later, I was sitting in my car across the street from my grandfather's house. My house. I watched as a man from Samantha's realty company hammered a sign into the front lawn. The deep red of the sign was stark against the green grass my grandfather had been so proud of. For sale. I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel regret. I just watched, a silent observer to the end of an era I had single-handedly propped up for far too long. They thought my kindness was a weakness they could exploit forever. They were about to find out it was a choice, and I was finally choosing myself. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. I glanced at the screen. It was my mother. I let it ring, but she immediately called back. And again. On the 4th try, I finally answered, holding the phone a few inches from my ear. I didn't even have a chance to say hello before her shriek ripped through the speaker. "What have you done? There's a sign on my lawn. You can't do this to your family." "You can't do this to your family," she'd screamed, and I'd simply replied, "You stopped being my family when you sent back that invitation. The house is for sale. You have 30 days to vacate." Then I hung up. I was sitting on the couch, staring at my blank television screen, when Aiden came home from work an hour later. He found me in the same position, my hand resting on my belly. He didn't have to ask what was wrong. He just saw the look on my face, kissed my forehead, and sat beside me, taking my hand. "They called, didn't they?" he asked. I nodded. "Mom, she saw the sign." "Good," he said, his voice low and firm. "It's about damn time, Robin." For 10 years, he'd watched them bleed me dry. He'd seen me write checks for the property taxes, listened to me cry after my mother called to complain that the dishwasher I'd bought them wasn't quiet enough. He'd held me when I found out Whitney had used my credit card, which I'd given her for a grocery emergency, to buy a designer handbag. He never once said, "I told you so." He just waited, patiently, for me to see it for myself. "You know they won't go quietly," he warned, rubbing his thumb over my knuckles. "You need to be ready to cut them off. All the way. No more phone calls, no more loans, no more anything." "I know," I said, leaning my head on his shoulder. "I signed the exclusive listing agreement with the realtor this morning. It's binding. There's no going back." Aiden squeezed my hand, a silent show of support that meant more than any words. We sat like that for a while, the quiet in our small apartment a welcome shield against the storm I knew was brewing. The storm arrived on our doorstep the next afternoon. The doorbell rang, and through the peephole, I saw my sister, Whitney, standing there with her 2 kids, aged 6 and 8, flanking her like tiny human shields. I opened the door just a crack. "What do you want, Whitney?" She pushed the door open, forcing her way inside. "Robin, what is going on? Mom is a wreck." "You can't be serious about this." She herded her children toward our couch as if they were regulars here, which they weren't. They'd been to our apartment exactly twice in 8 years. "I am serious," I said, staying by the door. "You have until the end of the month." Whitney's face, usually set in a smug pout, crumpled into a mask of faux concern. "Honey, you're not thinking straight. You're pregnant. You're emotional because of the hormones. You're making a huge mistake that you'll regret." The gaslighting was so predictable, so practiced. It was her go-to move. She'd used it years ago, right after Aiden and I got engaged. I was 26, deliriously happy. A week after I announced it, my mother sat me down for a talk. She told me she'd heard some disturbing things. That Aiden was a cheater. That he'd been seen with another woman. She was so convincing, so full of motherly worry, that I almost believed her. It was Aiden who figured it out. He calmly asked for details: when, where, who saw him. The story fell apart under the slightest scrutiny. It turned out the source was Whitney, who had twisted a story about Aiden having a coffee meeting with a female colleague into a sordid affair. She'd done it, she later admitted, in a tearful non-apology, because she was just looking out for me. She didn't want me to rush into things with a man nobody really knew. She wanted to sabotage my happiness because hers wasn't perfect. I forgave her, because that's what I always did. I wasn't forgiving her now. "My pregnancy has nothing to do with this," I said, my voice as cold as steel. "This is about a decade of you taking advantage of me. It's over." "But where will we go?" she wailed, gesturing around my tiny living room. "Liam and I have no savings. The kids. What about the kids?" "You've had 10 years to save, Whitney." 10 years of living for free in a house I paid for. Her eyes narrowed, the victim act melting away to reveal the familiar spite beneath. "It was Grandpa's house. It's our family home. He left it to me," I said flatly, "and I'm selling it." She saw she was getting nowhere. She gathered her kids, her movements sharp and angry. At the door, she turned back, her voice dripping with venom. "You'll be all alone with your little mistake. I hope you're happy." After she was gone, I locked the deadbolt and leaned against the door, my heart pounding. The calm had been breached, but the resolve held. I wouldn't break. Later that evening, as I was scrolling mindlessly through my emails, a new message popped up from an anonymous encrypted address. The subject line was just my name. My finger hovered over it for a second before I clicked. The message was short, just 2 sentences. "Check the county records for any liens against your property. A home equity line of credit was taken out against it 5 years ago, and the signature on the paperwork looks a lot like yours." My blood ran cold. I read the email 3 times, the words blurring together. A home equity line of credit, a forged signature. It felt impossible, like something out of a movie, but a sick feeling in my gut told me it was true. I forwarded the email to my best friend, Natasha Delgado, with a 1-line message. "Can you look into this?" Natasha is 35, a whip-smart attorney who has known me since kindergarten. She's seen the full spectrum of my family's dysfunction and has been telling me for years to set boundaries. She called me less than 10 minutes after I sent the email. "Robin, are you serious?" she asked, her voice stripped of its usual warmth. "I don't know," I whispered. "It was an anonymous tip." "Okay." "Don't say a word to anyone. Not your mom, not Whitney. Let me make some calls. I can pull the public records in the morning." The next 24 hours were agonizing. I didn't tell Aiden yet. I didn't want to worry him until I knew for sure. I just moved through my day in a fog, the anonymous email burning a hole in my mind. Natasha called the following afternoon. "I'm looking at a copy of the document right now," she said, her voice tight with fury. "A $50,000 line of credit was opened 5 years ago. The signature is a damn good forgery of yours, but it's not yours. I can see the slight hesitation in the loops. And guess who co-signed as a resident of the property? Caroline Simmons." My mother. Of course, it was my mother. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my head in my hands. $50,000, stolen from me, from the equity in my grandfather's house. "What do I do?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Legally?" "We have her dead to rights on bank fraud and identity theft," Natasha said. "But for now, we do nothing. We sit on this. This is our trump card, Robin. Don't you dare show your hand until I tell you to." I agreed, though the betrayal felt like a physical weight on my chest. I was building a legal case against my own mother. The thought was nauseating, but the cold resolve I'd felt when I received that invitation was hardening into something else. Armor. A few days later, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but I had a feeling I knew who it was. I let it go to voicemail. The message that followed was from a nurse at the local hospital. "This is a message for Robin Simmons. Your mother, Caroline, was brought into the emergency room. She's asking for you." My first instinct was panic, a Pavlovian response conditioned by a lifetime of her drama. But then Natasha's words echoed in my head. "Sit on this." I took a deep breath and called the hospital's main line, not the number that had called me. I asked for the ER desk. "I'm calling about a patient, Caroline Simmons," I said calmly. "I'm her daughter. Can you tell me her condition?" There was a pause and the sound of typing. "Ma'am, it looks like she was admitted for observation due to high blood pressure. The doctor discharged her about an hour ago." Discharged. She wasn't in the hospital at all. She had staged a fake medical emergency to guilt me into rushing to her side. I hung up the phone, the last vestiges of my filial duty turning to ash. The next day, Whitney escalated things. She posted a long, rambling paragraph on social media, accompanied by a sweet, smiling photo of her and my mother. "So heartbroken for my mom." It read. After a health scare landed her in the hospital, she's now facing being kicked out of her home of 10 years by her own daughter. Some people forget that family is supposed to be there for you, in sickness and in health. Family doesn't kick family out. Please send prayers for our strength during this difficult time. The comments poured in. Sympathy for my mother, condemnation for the cruel, unnamed daughter. Friends of hers, people I'd known my whole life, were liking the post. I was being painted as the villain in a story they only knew one side of. I wanted to scream, to post the forged bank documents, to tell everyone the truth. But I held back, trusting Natasha. I just deactivated my account and tried to breathe. The pressure was building, a silent, simmering war. They thought they were winning. That public shame and emotional manipulation would make me fold like I always had. They had no idea what was coming. A week later, I got a call from Samantha, the realtor. "Robin, I have fantastic news," she said, her voice bright and professional. "We have an offer, a very strong one, all cash, from a couple looking to move in as soon as possible. They've accepted our counteroffer. If you accept, closing is in 14 days. 14 days, I repeated, the words tasting like freedom. Yes, Samantha, I accept. Send me the paperwork. The moment I hung up, I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it, the final countdown. I immediately called my mother. She answered on the first ring, her voice wary. What? I've accepted an offer on the house, I said, my tone flat and businesslike. The closing is in 2 weeks. I suggest you start packing. Silence. Then, a sputtering rage. You can't, we need to talk about this. This is a family matter. You don't just make a decision like this alone. There's nothing to talk about, I said. But if you insist on a meeting, fine. One time, tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. At the coffee shop on Main Street. The coffee shop? Why can't you come to the house? Because it's not your house, I said, and hung up before she could reply. I chose the coffee shop deliberately. It was called Peace and Grounds, a bitter piece of irony that felt fitting. It was also a public place, where she was less likely to cause a scene. The next morning, I walked in to find them already there, huddled together in a booth, my mother, Whitney, and her husband, Liam. They looked like a tribunal, ready to pass judgment. I sat down opposite them, placing my purse on the table. This is insane, Robin, my mother began, skipping any pleasantries. You're throwing your family out on the street, after everything we've done for you. I almost laughed. Everything you've done for me? What exactly is that? We raised you, she snapped, her voice rising. We supported you. You lived in my house for free for a decade, I countered, my voice dangerously quiet. You let me pay for your lives while you criticized mine. That's not support, that's parasitism. Whitney jumped in, her face a mask of righteous indignation. You owe us. Family helps family. Grandpa would be ashamed of you. No, I said, looking her dead in the eye. He would be ashamed of you. Liam, who had been silent, finally spoke up, trying to play the reasonable peacemaker. Look, Robin, I think we're all just a bit emotional. Whitney's right, this pregnancy has you on edge. Maybe we can compromise. You take the house off the market, and we can start paying you some rent when we get our finances in order. It was the same old script. Stall, deflect, manipulate. But I had a new script today. I reached into my purse and pulled out a manila folder. I slid it across the table. You want to talk about finances? Let's talk about finances. My mother opened it. Inside was a copy of the home equity line of credit application, a copy of the forged signature, a copy of the bank statements showing withdrawals over the past 5 years, totaling just over $48,000. Cash withdrawals, payments to high-end department stores, a down payment on Whitney and Liam's new car. Caroline went white as a sheet. Whitney stared at the papers, her mouth hanging open. She looked at our mother, then at Liam, a dawning horror in her eyes. It was clear she knew about the loan, but I suspected she had no idea the money was almost gone. Liam snatched the papers from Caroline. His face went from confused to flushed with anger as he scanned the documents. He looked at Whitney, his expression one of utter betrayal. "You took out a loan against her house? You forged her signature?" He threw the papers down on the table. "Are you insane?" "It was for us, Liam," Whitney stammered. "For the car? For the kids' school. It was fraud," he hissed, his voice low and furious. He stood up so abruptly the table shook. "I'm out. I'm not getting involved in this." He stormed out of the coffee shop without a backward glance at his wife. I looked at my mother and sister, who were both pale and trembling. "The sale is final," I said, my voice void of all emotion. "The new owners will take possession in 13 days. If you are not out by then, they will file an eviction notice and the sheriff will remove you. And if you try to fight this, I will give these documents to the district attorney." "It's your choice." I stood up, leaving the folder on the table. I walked out of Peace and Grounds without looking back, the weight of a lifetime of their deception finally lifting from my shoulders. The next morning, I walked out to my car to go to a doctor's appointment. I stopped short in the driveway. All 4 of my tires were flat, the rubber sagging around the rims. In the side of each one was a clean, deep puncture mark, as if made by an ice pick. There was no note, no message. There didn't need to be. I stared at the slashed tires, a cold, hard knot forming in my stomach. It was such a petty, cowardly act of vandalism, a tantrum in physical form. I took a photo with my phone, sent it to Aiden, and then called a tow truck. I didn't file a police report. There was no proof, and honestly, it felt like a distraction from the real fight. This was just a pathetic attempt to scare me, to inconvenience me. It wouldn't work. While the tow truck driver changed my tires, I thought about the anonymous email. Someone was watching this unfold. Someone knew what my mother had done and wanted me to know, too. My mind drifted to the house, to the neighbors who had seen everything for years. One name came to mind: Harmony Swanson. Harmony, who is 58, lived next door to my grandfather for 30 years. She was more of a grandmother to me than my own had ever been. She'd always been kind, but with a sharp eye that didn't miss much. After my grandfather died, our contact had dwindled, mostly because my mother made it clear she didn't like Harmony poking her nose in our business. I drove my newly repaired car straight to my grandfather's street. Pulling up, I saw Harmony in her front yard, tending to her roses. She looked up as I got out of the car, her expression a mixture of surprise and something that looked like relief. "Robin, dear," she said, pulling off her gardening gloves. "I had a feeling I'd be seeing you." "Hello, Harmony," I said, managing a small smile. "It's been a while." "Too long," she agreed, her eyes twinkling sadly. "I saw the for sale sign. Your grandfather would be so proud of you." I flinched. "Proud? Whitney told me he'd be ashamed." Harmony let out a short, unladylike snort. "Whitney wouldn't know the truth if it bit her on the nose." "Your grandfather knew exactly who your mother was. He worried about her constantly, worried she'd take advantage of your good nature." We stood in silence for a moment, the scent of roses hanging in the air. Then, she looked me straight in the eye. "It was me, Robin. I sent you that email." I wasn't surprised, just grateful. "How did you know?" "Your mother isn't exactly subtle," Harmony said with a wry smile. 5 years ago, a man from the bank came around asking questions, doing an appraisal for a home equity loan. I thought it was odd, since I knew your grandfather had left you the house free and clear. I overheard Caroline on the phone in her backyard a few days later, talking to Whitney about practicing the signature so it would be perfect. It made my skin crawl. I kept my mouth shut, but when I saw that sign go up, I knew it was time for you to have all the facts. She wiped her hands on her apron. "Wait here a moment." She disappeared into her house and came back a minute later holding a thick yellowed envelope. My name was written on the front in my grandfather's familiar, spidery handwriting. "He gave this to me the week before he passed away," Harmony explained, her voice soft. "He said, 'Give this to Robin, but only when she's old enough and strong enough to need it. She'll know when the time is right, and so will you. I think that time is now.'" I took the letter, my fingers trembling. I got back in my car and tore it open. "My dearest Robin," it began. "If you are reading this, it means I am gone, and I can only hope that you are happy and well. I am leaving you the house, my girl. It is yours, and yours alone. I know your mother will try to convince you that it is a family home, but do not be fooled. A home is a place of love and support, not a roof to hold over someone's head like a prize. I am not a fool. I see how Caroline and Whitney treat you. They see your kindness as a resource to be tapped. I am giving you this house not as a burden, but as a key. It is your security, your nest egg, your escape hatch. When the time comes that you need to build your own future, I want you to sell this house without a shred of guilt. Do not let it become a gilded cage. Do not let yourself become a walking wallet for people who have never valued you. Your future is more important than their comfort. Live a good life, my Robin. Be strong. You deserve every happiness. All my love. Grandpa. Tears streamed down my face, hot and fast. It was grief, yes, but it was also validation. A permission slip from the one person whose opinion had ever truly mattered. He saw me. He knew. And he had given me his blessing to do exactly what I was doing. The last of my guilt washed away, replaced by a fierce, protective resolve. I would see this through to the end, for him, and for me. The drive home was a blur. I felt renewed, stronger than I had in years. When I walked through my front door, Aiden was waiting for me, a grim look on his face. He was holding a piece of certified mail. "It came while you were out," he said. "It's from a lawyer." I took the envelope from him. It was from a law firm I didn't recognize. I ripped it open and read the first line. It was a notice of a lawsuit filed against me. The plaintiff was Caroline Simmons. She was suing me, claiming I had exerted undue influence over my grandfather to get him to amend his will and leave me the house. She was demanding the sale be stopped immediately. A lawsuit. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. Suing me for undue influence over a will that had been executed 10 years ago. A will she had never contested until the moment her free ride was ending. It was a desperate, pathetic Hail Mary, and it was going to fail. I handed the papers to Aiden, who read them with a thunderous expression. "She's trying to put a lien on the house," he said, his voice tight. "To stop the sale." "She can try," I said, my voice eerily calm. I pulled out my phone and dialed Natasha. I explained the situation, and I could practically hear her smiling through the phone. "Oh, this is beautiful," she said. "She has no idea what she's just done. She's opened the door for us, Robin. We're no longer just defending, we're attacking. Send me a copy of that suit. We're filing a countersuit. First thing tomorrow." The lawsuit became the talk of our small town. My mother, ever the martyr, played her part to perfection. She told anyone who would listen that her pregnant hormonal daughter was being manipulated by her greedy husband into selling the family home out from under her. Some people believed her. I got dirty looks at the grocery store. Old family friends stopped calling. It stung, but I didn't care. The truth was a weapon, and I was finally ready to use it. Natasha was a shark. She filed the countersuit for fraud, attaching the bank documents, the forged signature, and a sworn affidavit from a handwriting expert. But she had one more card up her sleeve. "I did some digging into your sister's social media," Natasha told me over the phone a few days later. "She's not very smart about privacy settings. I found a conversation she had with your mother in a private message. but she took a screenshot of part of it to complain to a friend. The friend sent it to me. It's a gold mine. She emailed me the image. It was a screenshot of a text exchange between Whitney and Caroline. Whitney: did you get rid of the old bank statements like I told you to? The ones from the first year? Caroline: of course I did. They can't prove anything if the evidence is gone. Stop panicking. It was a direct admission of conspiring to hide evidence. It was everything we needed. Natasha added it to the lawsuit. The legal battle forced the buyers to pull out. Samantha called to tell me, her voice full of apology. The title company can't issue a clear title with a pending lawsuit, she explained. They're not willing to risk it. For a moment, I felt a pang of despair. But Samantha was already one step ahead. However, she continued, I spoke to another interested party. They've been waiting in the wings. They know about the lawsuit, and their lawyer is confident you'll win. They're willing to put in an offer and wait for the legal issues to be resolved. It was a lifeline. We accepted. Meanwhile, my family was imploding. The countersuit, with its undeniable proof of fraud, sent shockwaves through their lives. Liam, who had already walked out, officially filed for divorce from Whitney. In his petition, he cited financial deception and her involvement in a criminal enterprise as reasons their marriage was irrevocably broken. He was going for full custody of the kids, and it looked like he was going to get it. Whitney was unraveling. Without Liam's income and with her own name tied to the fraud, her life was falling apart. She lost her part-time job at a boutique when the owner, a friend of our mother's, saw the court filings. My mother, however, was the one who truly crumbled. The public narrative she had so carefully crafted was destroyed. She was no longer the poor, victimized mother. She was a thief and a liar. People crossed the street to avoid her. Her friends stopped answering her calls. The shame was eating her alive. One afternoon I was at home addressing the last of the baby shower invitations, a new, smaller list of people who had proven themselves to be true friends. When my phone rang, it was Natasha. You might want to turn on the local news, she said, her voice grim. I flipped on the TV. There on the screen was a live shot from outside the county courthouse. And being led out in handcuffs, her face pale and slack with shock, was my mother. Caroline Simmons, the reporter was saying, was arrested today on charges of felony bank fraud and identity theft following an investigation by the district attorney's office. The charges stem from a civil lawsuit filed against Mrs. Simmons by her daughter, Robin Simmons. They put her in the back of a police car. She looked small and pathetic, a queen without a kingdom, a martyr without a cause. I felt nothing, no pity, no satisfaction, just a quiet, hollow emptiness. The final cord had been cut. The criminal charges against my mother expedited everything. Her frivolous lawsuit claiming undue influence was summarily dismissed by a judge who was clearly unimpressed with a plaintiff currently facing felony fraud charges. With the lien gone, the path was clear for the house sale to proceed. The trial was a quiet, sterile affair in a nearly empty courtroom. My mother's lawyer had advised her to plead no contest to the charges in exchange for a more lenient sentence. It meant there would be no dramatic testimony, no cross-examinations, but I was still asked to give a victim impact statement. I stood before the judge, 8 months pregnant, my hands resting on my swollen belly. I didn't look at my mother, who sat hunched at the defendant's table. I looked at the judge, a woman about my mother's age with kind, intelligent eyes. Your Honor, I began, my voice clear and steady. This isn't just about money. $50,000 is a lot, but it's nothing compared to the trust that was stolen. For 10 years, I supported my family. I gave them a home, I paid their bills, I answered every call for help. I did it out of love and a sense of duty. And in return, my signature was forged, my inheritance was used as a personal slush fund, and my character was assassinated in our community when I finally stood up for myself. I paused, taking a breath. The message on the baby shower invitation said my child was a mistake. But the real mistake was my belief that you can force people to love you through sacrifice. The real mistake was thinking that blood makes a family. My mother's actions have cost me a great deal, but they've also given me a gift: clarity. I am building a new family now, one based on respect, honesty, and genuine love. I ask the court to hold her accountable not just for the money she stole, but for the profound and deliberate betrayal that I and my unborn child will carry forever. I sat down next to Aiden, who took my hand. The judge sentenced my mother to 5 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, and full financial restitution. She was also ordered to undergo counseling. In a small town where reputation is everything, it was a life sentence of public shame. She had lost everything. The fallout for Whitney was just as devastating. With Liam granted full custody of their children due to her instability and involvement in the fraud, she was truly alone. She had no job, no money, and no home. Her friends, who had so eagerly rallied to her side on social media, vanished once the truth came out. She was a pariah. 2 weeks later, the house sale closed. The new owners were a young family, and seeing their excitement as Samantha handed them the keys felt right. It was a new beginning for them and for the house itself. I had asked Samantha if I could have one last hour in the house alone before the final walkthrough. She agreed. I walked through the empty rooms, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. The ghosts of my past were everywhere. The spot in the kitchen where my grandfather taught me to make pancakes. The living room where my mother criticized every boyfriend I ever brought home. The hallway where Whitney and I used to measure our height on the doorframe. For so long I had thought of this place as my burden, the anchor that kept me tied to a family that didn't deserve me. But as I stood in the empty dining room, sunlight streaming through the clean windows, I realized my grandfather had been right. It wasn't a cage. It was a key. It had been my key to finally breaking free. I ran my hand along the mantelpiece, a faint layer of dust coming away on my fingertips. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I was just done. I said a silent goodbye to my grandfather, thanking him for his foresight and his love. Then I walked out the front door, locked it behind me for the last time, and didn't look back. A few days later, a letter arrived at our apartment. The handwriting on the envelope was Whitney's. I held it for a long time, weighing it in my hand. Aiden watched me from the kitchen doorway. "You don't have to read it," he said gently. I looked from the letter to his face, then back again. Was it an apology? A final, venomous threat? Another plea for help? I knew that whatever was inside, it was a remnant of a life I was leaving behind. There was only one way to find out what it said. I slid my thumb under the flap of the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of notebook paper. Whitney's familiar, loopy handwriting filled the page. Robin. I don't even know what to say. Mom is a wreck and Liam won't let me see the kids. I have nowhere to go. I guess you got what you wanted. You destroyed our family over a house. I know what we did was wrong. Mom told me she was just borrowing against the equity and would pay it back. I didn't know she was forging your name, not at first. But I should have said something later. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for the things I said about the baby. I hope you're happy now that you're all alone. You might have the money, but you have no one. It was exactly what I expected. A half-hearted apology wrapped in a thick blanket of bitterness and blame. She was sorry, but not really. It was still somehow my fault. You destroyed our family. As if it wasn't already rotten from the inside out. I walked over to the decorative fireplace in our living room, the one we filled with candles instead of logs. I lit a match, held the corner of the letter to the flame, and dropped it into the hearth. I watched as the words curled into black ash, the smoke carrying away the last remnants of my sister's poison. It was over. A week later, our living room was filled with bright balloons and the cheerful chatter of friends. Natasha had insisted on throwing me a proper baby shower, and our small apartment was packed with people who genuinely loved us. Harmony was there, holding court by the snack table and telling stories about my grandfather. Samantha, the realtor, had stopped by with a ridiculously large diaper cake. My colleagues from work, old college friends, Aiden's family, they were all there. I sat on the couch, opening tiny outfits and soft blankets, feeling a sense of peace that was so profound it was almost dizzying. This was family, the people who showed up, the ones who celebrated your joy and defended your honor. Aiden came and sat beside me, handing me a small rectangular gift wrapped in plain brown paper. "This one's from me," he said, his eyes soft. I unwrapped it carefully. It was a simple black frame. Inside, against a white background, were elegant printed words. "Family isn't blood. It's who shows up when you need them most." Tears welled in my eyes, happy tears for the first time in a long time. I leaned over and kissed him, a deep, grateful kiss. "It's perfect," I whispered. Later, as the party wound down, I stood with Natasha by the window, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "You know," she said, sipping her drink, "I've been waiting for you to do this for 15 years. "I wasn't ready," I admitted. "I had to believe there was something there worth saving. Some things are meant to be burned down so you can build something better on the ashes," she said sagely. She gave my shoulder a squeeze. "Revenge looks good on you, by the way. It's very slimming." I laughed, a real, genuine laugh that came from my soul. She was right. I had spent so long being the peacekeeper, the good daughter, the reliable sister. I had contorted myself into knots to please people who were incapable of being pleased. Taking back my power hadn't made me a monster. It had made me myself. Karma works slower than revenge, but both arrive eventually. Mine had showed up wearing a business suit and heels, carrying a briefcase full of evidence. They thought I was weak because I loved them. They were wrong. I stopped loving them, and it saved me.